Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. We got a really fascinating case this time.
Yeah, this one's a wild one.
You guys sent in this episode of Anatomy of Murder, and, well, we've got a murder to unpack.
We do. We've got a lot to unpack in this case.
So this is the murder of Alicia McQueen, and I gotta say some of the details in this one are pretty out there.
Yeah, we see a lot of cases, but this one's got some twists and turns that really stand out.
Yeah, so why don't we start with the basics? Where and when did all of this happen?
Okay, so we're in Ecorse, Michigan, just outside of Detroit, August 2018, summertime.
Summertime. Got it.
And we've got this father and daughter just out for a fun afternoon, learning to drive a go-kart. And they're doing this in this big abandoned aluminum factory.
I mean, it sounds kind of fun, right?
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty good time. Wide open space, nobody around until they stumble across something.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's not good. A skeletal hand?
Oh, my God.
Just lying there on the concrete. Not something you want to see on a casual afternoon go-karting trip.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
So what did the investigators know about this hand right away?
Well, right off the bat, they see it's missing 2 fingers.
2 fingers. Okay.
The remaining ones have these long acrylic nails.
Oh, wow. So that's already a pretty striking detail.
Oh, yeah, and the decomposition was pretty advanced.
Okay, so it had been there a while.
Yeah, it had been out in the elements for some time.
Uh-huh.
So identifying the victim right away, not easy.
Right, because I imagine fingerprints and stuff are...
Yeah, not an option at this point.
Okay.
So what do? They bring in the big guns, a cadaver dog.
Oh, yeah, the cadaver dogs.
Yeah, those pups are amazing. I mean, they can sniff out even the tiniest trace of human remains.
So are they, trained to sniff for specific things?
Yeah. It's not just any dog,
Yeah.
They're specially trained to detect the scent of certain chemicals that are released during decomposition.
Oh, wow. So they can basically, smell death.
Pretty much, yeah. It's pretty incredible what they can do.
And I've heard they can even find remains that are, buried underground.
That's right. Even buried, hidden away, you name it. These dogs are like 4-legged forensic experts.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So in this case, the dog leads investigators to another gruesome discovery.
Okay.
More human remains, but this time they're encased in concrete.
Wait, encased in concrete?
Yeah. The killer essentially made a concrete tomb, preserving parts of the body while leaving others exposed.
So this is already getting complicated and pretty disturbing.
Definitely not your average crime scene.
Yeah, and then you mentioned this whole concrete composite thing, and I was like, what is that?
Right, so this is where it gets really interesting. As the concrete hardened around the victim's skull, it actually created this super detailed impression of her face.
So like a mold almost.
Exactly like a mold, a death mask almost.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you can actually see her nose ring, her piercing, even the unique contours of her face, all preserved in the concrete.
Gosh, that's both fascinating and terrifying.
I know, right? It's like something out of an ancient Egyptian tomb, but made of modern-day concrete. So they had this concrete composite, and they were like, well, we got to use this.
Right.
They start cross-referencing it with missing persons reports.
Okay.
And they get a hit. Alicia McQueen, a young mother of 5 who disappeared about 5 months before.
So they have a potential victim, a pretty disturbing crime scene, but how do they go from there to figuring out who did this and why?
Well, this is where the investigation really starts to dive into the world of domestic violence.
Okay.
Because Alicia's relationship with her ex-husband, Gregory McQueen, that was not a good situation.
So we're already looking at the ex-husband as a suspect.
He's definitely on the radar right away, especially with their history, years of physical, mental, even economic abuse.
Yeah, I've heard that term economic abuse before, but I don't really know what it means.
Yeah, it's a form of control where the abuser, cuts off the victim's access to finances.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It makes them totally dependent. In Alicia's case, Gregory controlled her bank accounts, her credit cards, even her ability to get a job.
Wow, so he's basically trapping her.
Exactly, and that makes it so much harder for victims to leave even when they're in danger.
Yeah, because they might feel like they have nowhere to go.
Exactly. They have no resources. They're completely reliant on the abuser. It's a terrifying situation.
So with all that going on, how do the investigators start to connect Gregory to the crime?
Well, at first it's tough. The biggest hurdle is the condition of the remains.
Okay.
They can't immediately use DNA or dental records because of the decomposition.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You need a viable sample for DNA analysis.
Right.
And in this case, it wasn't so straightforward. But then another piece of the puzzle falls into place.
Okay.
Just a couple of months before Alicia disappeared, there was this break-in at her sister's house.
Oh, no.
A masked man attacked both of them.
Gosh.
And Alicia, even though he was wearing a mask, she recognized him.
She recognized Gregory.
Yeah, she knew it was him.
So she was a witness to another crime.
Exactly, and a crime that could put him away for a long time.
So maybe that's the motive, right? He wanted to silence her.
It's certainly possible, but here's where it gets even more interesting. At the time of that home invasion, Gregory was out on bond.
For the home invasion?
Yep. And as part of his release, he had to wear one of those GPS ankle monitors.
So they could track his every move.
Exactly. And guess what the data from that monitor showed?
Okay.
It placed him at the exact location of the body dump.
Oh, wow.
Not once, but 3 separate times.
3 times. It's pretty incriminating.
Yeah, it seems like a slam dunk, right? But was it enough to charge him with murder? Not right away. Prosecutors, they hit a snag. They couldn't definitively identify the body.
Right, because of the decomposition.
Exactly. Without that confirmation, getting a murder charge would be a tough sell.
So they're kind of stuck then.
Pretty much. But they're not giving up. They offer Gregory a plea deal on those home invasion charges.
Okay, so hoping he'll maybe give them something more about Alicia's disappearance.
Right, maybe he'll slip up, say something. But Gregory, he's feeling pretty confident.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he thinks he can play the system. Refuses the plea deal. Gambles that the statute of limitations on the home invasion case is going to run out.
He thinks they won't be able to identify the body in time.
Exactly. Thinks he can just get away with it. But investigators, they're not done yet.
This is where the nail glue comes in, right?
Got it. Remember those acrylic nails?
Yeah.
Well, turns out there were skin cells trapped in the glue,
Oh, wow.
and they were able to extract DNA from those cells. Perfect match to Alicia McQueen.
That's incredible. It's amazing what they can do with forensic science these days.
I know, right? So now they have the confirmation they need. The remains are Alicia's. They issue a warrant for Gregory's arrest on murder charges.
And they serve the warrant right there in the courtroom.
Yep, during the home invasion proceedings. Can you imagine?
Talk about a dramatic twist.
And it gets even crazier. Gregory sees what's happening and he panics.
Oh, no.
Dude actually escapes from custody right there in the courtroom.
He escaped? How is that even possible?
Total chaos. Brawling with officers, a full-on escape attempt in the middle of a massive ice storm.
Are you serious? Like a movie scene?
I know it's wild, but don't worry, they eventually catch him.
Okay, good.
After a tense chase, of course. So finally, after all of that, Gregory McQueen is charged with Alicia's murder.
Wow, what a roller coaster. It's amazing how determined Detective Sasek was to get justice for Alicia and her family.
Oh, absolutely. He never gave up. This case really shows what happens when law enforcement combines like that good old-fashioned detective work with the latest forensic science.
Right, it was a team effort.
Totally. And it also underscores just how devastating domestic violence can be. Alicia's story, it's a tragic reminder that this kind of abuse, it can have fatal consequences.
Yeah, we talked about the physical and economic abuse, but it's important to remember that the mental and emotional toll, that can be just as damaging.
Absolutely. It's all about control. The constant put-downs, the isolation from friends and family chipping away at someone's self-worth, it's incredibly destructive.
And it can be so hard to recognize the signs, especially for people outside the relationship.
That's true, but there are some red flags to look out for.
Like what?
Well, isolation is a big one. Abusers, they often try to cut their victims off from their support system.
So they're all alone.
Exactly. And then you might see sudden changes in behavior, like becoming withdrawn or anxious or fearful.
Okay.
And of course, any unexplained injuries, bruises, cuts, those should always raise concerns.
Right, and it's important to remember that this can happen to anyone.
Absolutely. Age, gender, socioeconomic status, it doesn't matter. Abuse can happen anywhere to anyone.
So what can someone do if they think someone they know might be in an abusive situation?
It's a tough one. The most important thing is to approach the situation with empathy and without judgment.
So don't be accusatory.
Right. Just let them know that you care, that you're there for them, that you believe them. Create a safe space for them to open up if they're ready.
But don't push them.
Exactly. And if they do decide to talk, listen without interrupting or giving unsolicited advice.
Just listen.
Yeah, validate their feelings, let them know they're not alone. And if they're ready to take action, help them connect with resources like domestic violence shelters or hotlines.
All right, there are organizations that can help.
Absolutely. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is a great resource.
I'd heard of that one.
They offer confidential support 24/7. It's so important to have those resources available.
Yeah, definitely. This case really highlights the importance of forensic science, especially that DNA evidence from Alicia's nail glue.
Oh, yeah. It was a game changer.
It makes you wonder how many other cases are out there just waiting for that one crucial piece of evidence.
It's true, and that's why it's so important to keep pushing the boundaries of forensic science and investigative techniques.
We need to keep getting better at solving these crimes.
Absolutely, because justice for the victims and their families, that's what it's all about. But it's also about supporting the victims, helping them heal, and addressing the systemic issues that contribute to violence in the first place.
You know, you mentioned systemic issues earlier, and it got me thinking about something Gregory said during his escape attempt.
Oh, yeah.
He told Detective Sasic, I had nothing to lose.
Right.
And it just struck me as so callous, so detached. But it also made me wonder about the systems we have in place to protect victims of domestic violence. Did those systems fail, Alicia? Could more have been done?
It's a tough question.
Yeah, I know.
It's easy to look back and point fingers, but the reality is domestic violence is incredibly complex.
Right.
There's not always a clear answer. We can't always predict when a situation is going to turn violent, but are there things we can do to improve the system? Absolutely.
Like what?
Well, for starters, we need to believe victims when they come forward.
That seems so basic.
I know, but too often their stories are dismissed. They're made to feel like they're overreacting, or even that it's their fault.
Wow.
We need to create a culture where victims feel safe speaking up, knowing they'll be taken seriously.
And they need access to resources, too.
Exactly. Legal aid, counseling, safe housing, financial assistance, things that can help them get out of those abusive situations.
So it's not just about listening. It's about providing real, tangible support.
Right. And we also need to tackle the root causes of violence.
Like what?
A lot of it stems from these really deep-seated societal norms about gender and power and control.
Yeah, I can see that.
Challenging those norms, promoting healthy relationships, that have to be a priority.
There's a long road ahead.
It is. But it's a road we have to travel.
So what can our listener take away from all of this? From Alicia's story?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we all have a role to play in preventing violence and supporting victims.
So what can we actually do?
It can be small things, Educate yourself about the signs of abuse.
Okay.
Listen to and believe someone who discloses abuse.
Right.
Donate to an organization that supports victims. Or it can be bigger things like speaking out against harmful attitudes and behaviors or advocating for policies that protect victims and hold abusers accountable.
So it's about recognizing that this is a problem we all need to be concerned about.
Exactly. It's not just a private matter, it's a societal issue.
And we can't forget that behind every statistic, every news story, there's a real person whose life has been affected.
Right. Alicia McQueen was a mother, a daughter, a sister, a friend. Her life was cut short, but her story can help us create change.
We can honor her memory by working to prevent this from happening to someone else.
And by supporting those who have already been affected by violence.
This has been a really powerful deep dive.
It has.
Thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
Of course, it's been my pleasure.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us. We hope this has sparked some important conversations and maybe even inspired you to take action.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about, isn't it?
It is. So many cases that might never get solved.
Right. And it makes you realize how important it is to keep innovating in forensic science, Always looking for new ways to uncover the truth.
To bring closure to families who've lost loved ones.
Exactly. But justice, it's not just about catching the bad guy. It's about helping the victims heal, addressing those bigger issues that contribute to violence in the first place.
And speaking of those bigger issues, we talked earlier about that chilling statement Gregory made during his escape attempt. I had nothing to lose.
Yeah, that really stuck with me, too.
It was so cold,
Yeah.
so detached. And it made me wonder about the systems we have, the ones that are supposed to protect victims of domestic violence. Did those systems fail, Alicia? Could something more have been done to help her?
It's tough to say for sure. It's
Yeah.
always easier to look back and say, what if? But the truth is domestic violence is so complex. There
Yeah.
are so many factors involved. And sometimes even with the best intentions, things slip through the cracks.
But surely there are things we can do to make those systems better
Oh, absolutely. I think
Yeah.
the most important thing is to start by believing victims.
when they come forward.
Yeah. Too often they're dismissed. Their stories aren't taken seriously.
They're told they're overreacting or that it's their own fault.
Exactly. We have to create a culture where victims feel safe speaking up, knowing that they'll be heard and believed.
And supported.
Yes. And that support needs to be more than just words,
What do you mean?
Well, they need access to resources like legal aid counseling, safe housing, financial assistance.
Practical things that can help them get out of those dangerous situations.
Exactly. We also need to be talking about the root causes of violence.
You mentioned those earlier.
Yeah, things like gender inequality, power imbalances, unhealthy ideas about relationships and control.
We need to challenge those things.
Absolutely. And promote healthy relationships from a young age.
So much work to be done.
It's a long road, but it's a journey we have to take. For Alicia, for all victims of violence.
So for our listener out there, what can they take away from Alicia's story? What can they do?
Well, I think the most important thing is to remember that we all have a role to play in preventing violence.
Even if you're not directly affected by it.
Exactly. It can start small, you know? Educate yourself about the signs of abuse. Listen to and believe someone who discloses abuse. Donate to an organization that supports victims. Or it can be bigger things, like speaking out against those harmful attitudes and behaviors.
Right, calling out that sexist joke or challenging that friend who's being disrespectful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Advocate for policies that protect victims and hold abusers accountable. It all makes a difference.
Because this isn't just a private issue, it's something we all need to be concerned about.
Right, it's a societal issue. And we can't forget the human cost, you know?
Behind all the statistics, the legal jargon, the headlines.
Exactly. Alicia McQueen was a real person with a family and friends who loved her. Her life was cut short way too soon.
But her story can be a catalyst for change.
It can. We can honor her memory by working to create a world where violence, especially domestic violence, is less likely to happen in the first place.
And by supporting those who've been affected by violence on their path to healing and justice.
That's right, because everyone deserves to feel safe and respected.
Well, this has been a truly powerful and thought-provoking deep dive. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights with us.
It's been my pleasure, really.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope it's given you some things to think about and maybe even inspired you to get involved. Remember, knowledge is power. And by understanding the dynamics of violence and the resources that are out there, we can all work together to create a safer, more just world.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.